Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Chat. Now, in today's episode, I'm being joined by Sam Bakken, who is the Senior Product Marketing Manager at OneSpan. So, Sam, thank you very much for coming on today's episode.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to have a really good conversation because we're going to be doing a little bit of myth busting today. In particular, Sam's going to be addressing the use of biometrics, the myths surrounding the tech, and really its future going forward. So to kick off with, as we're talking about this, it would be great if you could kind of set the scene a little bit and tell us about the use of biometric technology today.
Yeah, for sure. So, a lot of where we're seeing some pickup with biometrics has to do with biometric authentication and kind of remote use cases, right? Where someone is logging into an account and, wanting to log in a way that's easier and faster. And I would argue in some ways more secure. And so in a lot of cases, we work with a lot of financial institutions, obviously, and them being able to improve the user experience by, biometrics are really fast and easy. And then also improve some of the trust and accountability there with a biometric modality. That's really where we're seeing a lot of the uptake right now.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a fantastic space to kind of be in, and there's a lot of kind of evolution going along, but there's also a lot of areas that need to be addressed. And I kind of mentioned it briefly in the intro, but there are some misconceptions about biometric technologies, right? And in particular, in terms of how they're going to be integrated into these existing processes that are already in place in businesses. So could you walk us through some of these myths and tell us why they really are just that?
Yeah. So, one myth that I encounter quite a bit myself is actually that, face or fingerprint recognition is easily fooled. I think that's definitely not true. It's not exactly easy to do these things, right? Today's sophisticated biometric authentication systems have what's called presentation attack defense and liveness detection. And what a presentation attack is it's a sort of a malicious individual trying to use some sort of produced or manufactured biometric trait to then pass through a system. And I think that security researchers in the past have had some luck in ideal laboratory conditions defeating some consumer-grade implementations of biometrics. But I think that today's technology, sometimes referred to as sort of third-party biometric authentication technology, actually, so that it's not just device native. We're not talking about a Samsung device or Apple Face ID. We're talking about some more robust, third-party technology and algorithms that are not dependent on the device itself. And those solutions tend to come with more robust liveness detection and defense against spoofs like that.
Mm-hmm. So how do we get to kind of a point of really education, of getting people to understand this is what it is, but the technology is there, it can be integrated successfully? How do we kind of get to that point?
Yeah, well, I think, in general, a lot of the sort of market research that I read shows that consumers want easier ways to log in to their various accounts, right? Consumers want this. And in a lot of cases as well, these consumers are saying that, biometrics, when they can use biometrics, it actually affects their perception of the security of whatever sort of provider they're using, right? So if they are familiar with, logging in with a fingerprint or with facial recognition to their bank account, they will say that they think that is more secure, and they see it as more secure than, consumers or users that do not experience that. So, it bleeds into this other myth where, biometric authentication is maybe less trustworthy than login credentials or something like that. But I think that's just definitely not true because, it's not, biometric authentication doesn't depend on, biometric traits being secret per se. It's all about, again, that liveness detection to make sure that the person is right there. And that is the person that is providing this biometric sample so that you have even further sort of validation that the user really is who they claim they are.
Yeah, which makes complete sense, and that's one of the whole reason it was introduced, to have that logical kind of identity assurance. So it's interesting, as I mentioned before, to see this space and to see where it kind of grows. And as my kind of final wrap-up question here, it's a case of, what do you expect to see from biometric technologies as we kind of advance forward, or what do you hope to see really?
Yeah, I think, I look at that in sort of two phases. I think that right now we're obviously it's changed a lot of things, but, coronavirus, COVID-19 is having an impact on biometrics as well. People will be potentially more likely to wear gloves, for example, throughout the year, rather than just, in winter here in Chicago, for example, or they will be more likely to wear face masks, right? And so those sorts of personal protective equipment is going to affect what biometrics will be useful to the largest sort of population of people. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with, facial recognition and being able to potentially recognize someone even if they have a face mask on. And, you might say, well, then why don't we move to sort of iris recognition? I think that there are some problems with people that wear glasses and iris recognition, actually. So that's another challenge. But there are a lot of challenges here that we're going to have to address in terms of that, coronavirus impact. And then further on down the line, and perhaps in a similar fashion, it's just like the interfaces that people are going to use. There's one biometric modality out there that is sort of interesting to me, which is you're wearing earbuds or whatever, and the earbud can actually send some information, or send sound, waves, and then pick up the reflection back to build a profile of an individual's ear canal, essentially. Okay. And so that, as you might imagine, if you commute to work, etc., you might have your earbuds in anyway, and so that's an easy way to potentially authenticate yourself. And so I think a lot of what wearables will really take off, what will more and more people use, I think that'll really affect where we're going with biometrics in the future. So I guess that's what I had to say about the future of biometrics. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting take, especially with the wearable elements as well. It'll be kind of interesting to see as that space develops. And as you say, the possibilities are endless in terms of fixing issues that are currently being faced, but also where you can take it and implement it in the future. So Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure kind of getting your insight into all of this. So thank you very much for taking the time, coming on this episode and talking to us about it.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's a great topic, like you said, very interesting stuff. So I'm always happy to talk about it. Thanks again.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. And thank you everyone who took the time to watch this episode. We'll be back next week with another episode in our Tech Chat series. If you want more information, make sure you head on over to onespan.com. In the meantime, you can also find us on our social channels, which is EM360 on Twitter and LinkedIn. And of course, for more great content, make sure you head on over to em360tech.com.